got a fun evening for you tonight. Welcome, thank you for joining us. I was looking at the chat line and we've got colleagues here from Dumfries to Devon, from Nottingham to Northampton, and from Dorset to Dubai, with a lot of other colleagues in between. Welcome. Do share where you are. There's snow in Glenshee, apparently. Keep warm, everybody, wherever you are. Thanks, Debbie. Take me on, please. I thought I'd start with a tiny bit of a story, not the whole story, just a tiny bit of this rather remarkable book. This small blue dot, the author of which and illustrator is Zeno Sorda. He won the New Illustrator Award in the Australian Children's Book Council this year, 2021. It's a book to treasure. Thank you. Welcome to Earth. There's a lot of strange stuff going on out there, but here are some of the things I've worked out so far. It turns out we're living on a small blue dot. No joke. What are these other dots? There are billions and billions of stars. So many, I lost count. But ours is special. As far as we know, it's the only one with life. Here on our dot, Mother Nature gave life to so many amazing things. Elephants and dung beetles, pears and butterflies, tall trees and earthworms. We're all connected. Mother Nature also made broccoli, but we all make mistakes. Luckily, she made strawberries too. Our dot is pretty great, and we only have this one, so we need to take care of it. And when I grow up, I'm going to explore all of it. And if you're good, you can come with me. But we shouldn't be in a rush to grow up. At least that's what Grandpa says. He knows a lot of stuff. You can tell because his face looks like scrunched up paper. He says, when you're young, the summers are longer and your knees don't creak. But if you ask me, though, the secret best part of being young is having a wild imagination. It lets you. And then the book takes us on to all sorts of wild and wonderful places that she can imagine. And I'm sure you could fill the rest of the book with your classes of children of whatever age to share their, it lets you, what does it let us do, the imagination? Travel to new and wild and warmer places, meet other people who we don't know. Well, tonight we're going to meet a lot of other people, many of whom we do know, and all of whom are very welcome here. It's fabulous to have so many people, nearly 150 in the room at this point, just before Christmas, when everybody's got wall-to-wall stuff to do, cards to write, let's not go there, cakes to bake, and heaven knows what else, lists to make, if you're a woman at least. I don't know, do men make lists? Do take us on, Debbie, and we'll share what is in store for you this evening. I'm not going to go through each piece, but I just wanted to really highlight we've got a great, rich newsletter live in store for you with lots of fabulous colleagues sharing different aspects of their work and different books they want to. And first up is Helen Henderson. So over to Helen.
I've got 4 bits of exciting news for you from the Open University. So the first is that our student teacher Reading for Pleasure ambassadors are hard at work promoting reading for pleasure with their peers in universities across the UK. These include things like brilliant newsletters, book sharing events on diversity, and providing online opportunities for discussion around teachers' choices of reading for pleasure. And if you're an ITE colleague and you would like to participate in the scheme next year, we'll be sharing some more information about this possibility in January. So the next excellent piece of news I have for you is that there's a wonderful new free to access badged open course online available from the end of January called Developing Reading for Pleasure, Engaging Young Readers. And it's suitable for teachers, student teachers, teaching assistants, librarians and parents. And we'll be sharing the link widely when it's there ready for you at the end of January. So, the third piece of news for you is that there are new videos coming to the Reading for Pleasure OU website, and the first one that's on there already is Sonia Thompson, who's head teacher at St Matthew's Teaching School in Birmingham, and she's recorded a really interesting piece of video for us that you might like to use or just have a look at yourselves about sustaining reading for pleasure over the longer term with the school community. And there'll be more like that are in the editing and production process ready for the new year. So my last but by no means least bit of news for you is about the Reading Schools programme that we run here at the Open University. And we're looking for schools that would like to be part of this for our next cohort in the academic year 22 to 23. It's a research-based programme that works with the whole school community, head teachers and English leads to develop a bespoke approach to the reading for pleasure, pedagogy and needs of your school. We usually put together groups of up to about 14 schools, and so far we've worked with networks of schools and hubs that are already connected. So we're interested in hearing from networks of schools and occasionally individual schools who we might include with another smaller network in this work together. And the aim is to build pedagogy, subject knowledge, all based on the research from the OU and lots of other research that we draw on too, with a sustained impact on children's reading engagement for all children, and in particular the 20% or so of children in your schools who may not choose to read, engaging them in becoming motivated volitional readers. So do get in touch if you're interested, because it's a wonderful programme and we really love the work that we do.
Thanks, Helen. Great to hear the news. Over to Sarah Hepworth, who's going to be sharing some of her top texts, and I think it's graphic novels. Over to you, Sarah.
It is. Thank you, Teresa. And thank you for inviting me to talk tonight. I was really excited to be asked to share my top tips for graphic novels. It was really tricky to choose, and I was sat there thinking, well, why have I chosen certain books? And I think for me, I've chosen the ones which are really memorable, or they've kind of made a bit of a difference to me. And for those of you who don't explore graphic novels, I highly suggest it. They're just accessible, great texts, particularly great for children but who maybe they don't have the attention span or the time to spend on longer texts. But I found that they've just really helped unlock the key for some children as well, and then that's really broadened their horizons. And obviously we're all here to discuss our reading for pleasure, so they're great type of text for doing that. So my first one perhaps has stretched my target a little bit, because I'm supposed to be talking about graphic novels, and I've chosen this book here, which is a series of books by Button Books, and it's Great Lives in Graphics. Now, the one that I'm sharing is a Stephen Hawking one. I have classed it as a graphic novel, although it is non-fiction, because it's just beautiful. I love the facts that are included, and I love the illustrations. If I just share with you this one here, so we've got a map here. But what's fantastic is that there's lots of different types of visuals in there. So you've got timelines, you've got maps, you've got other little points of narratives and conversations as well. And it's just beautiful. And other key famous people that they've had as part of theirs has also been Anne Frank and Martin Luther King as well. Accessible, I would say, for year 2 upwards. So across most of primary. My second one, this one I read and it really lasted with me. The illustrations are stunning. I love the vibrancy in the book. So this one here is Leo and the Gorgon's Curse, which is by Joe Todd Stanton. It's another one that's part of a collection, so it's part of Mythical Story collection, and this is book 4 in the collections. The other ones, if they're like this quality, I'm sure will be stunning as well. This book here is focused around Greek mythology, and I love the illustrations in this. As I said, they're vibrant, they're really enticing and engaging, but they've also got some lovely contrast as well. So this is one where it's a beautiful contrast in the page, but then on other pages you'll get the vibrancy of the characters and the different pictures in there as well. It's just so appealing to readers because you've got obviously the element of speech within it, and it's not daunting for them. So it's a beautiful and stunning book. And for this one in particular, I really liked the character journey as well. If you kind of think that graphic novels can't develop characters and depth and theme, think again, because that one's fantastic for it. And my last one, and I did say to Teresa and the rest of the team last night, is that I really couldn't decide on my third spot. I had one that was a Key Stage 1 choice and I had one which was Key Stage 2. And I've plumped for the Key Stage 2 choice. So this is Upper Key Stage 2. And that's because this is an adaptation of Philip Pullman's Northern Lights. So it's obviously a graphic novel version, adapted by Stephanie, I want to say Melchior, but it's incredibly dark and wonderful. So if you are a fan of dark and wonderful text, this one's that choice. Is that my 30 seconds?
It is your 30 seconds. You can wave your early years one later. Not now, we're getting behind already. How did I manage that? Over to Ben, who's going to share an example of practice he's developing around non-fiction. Over to you, Ben.
Hello, everyone. Hope you can hear me.
You can.
Hi, it's a great pleasure to be speaking again tonight at this. And I was invited to talk about this project that I'm in the middle of at the moment. So I'm, as many of you might know, I'm an absolute huge fan of reading aloud in class. And I've done a number of examples of practice on reading aloud. But this one was something that I started earlier this year because I was on the UKLA long listing panel over the summer, and I'd done a lot of reading of non-fiction that I wanted to share a lot of that with the children. So I started to read aloud non-fiction for pleasure. So is the presentation, that's it, good. So what I've called it is Everything You Knew About Read Aloud is Wrong. Well, maybe just one thing, and that's maybe that we call it story time. I used to call it story time. I call it read aloud time now, because I'm reading aloud non-fiction too. So if we go on to the next slide. So this project is all about the reading for pleasure pedagogy of reading aloud and book talk. And what I found out about reading aloud nonfiction so far and what the book talk, how it changes is what I was quite interested to see what would happen. Next slide, please. So I wanted to develop their enjoyment of non-fiction. I wanted the children to connect their book talk to non-fiction more and to explore what happened with that. And I wanted to give them models as I was reading aloud and talking about the books, about how to talk and learn from non-fiction as well. So that was part of the agenda. So I selected some new non-fiction books and one old but gold from my own childhood. This is Unusual Creatures here. If we go on to the next slide. And so when I was reading them aloud, I was noticing that their book talk was very different to when I would read a novel or even poetry. They were very much more engaged with naturally talking about the books, and those who didn't always engage did so much more readily. And they made lots of connections to their own lives. So when I was reading The Unusual Creature, no, it was one that's coming up a bit later, Invented by Animals, where they were talking about a gecko on one of it and how scientists have created this super glue that's been invented by, that's been inspired by geckos. They would say things like, oh, I've got this gecko, I've got this. It's like that. And then things like, it's like a film I've been watching. And so the children would make comment about those things as they were reading with the story. Well, sorry, with the non-fiction. Next slide, please. And so the reflections that I had while I was reading is that I must read much more, read aloud for pleasure. So this was Counting on Catherine, another great book that I've read aloud to them. And I also thought with that is that I read aloud stories to the children, but one of the problems is that we want children to become rounded readers. So we want the children to be reading non-fiction, poetry, stories as well. And so depending on how a child is enjoying their reading, they might say they're choosing non-fiction for great enjoyment, but that doesn't necessarily get shared as a whole class. So I thought that would be a really important thing to do. Next slide. And so I was thinking as well about reading non-fiction has a whole different sort of set of rules and vocabularies that children need to be exposed to. It makes for social equity. They will hear language that they don't use necessarily in their everyday lives. So Alex Quigley talks about this a lot in his research about vocabulary, but I've noticed that's particularly important in non-fiction, and it's very sort of obvious when you're reading non-fiction aloud. Next slide, please. I wrote a blog, so if you'd like to go to my blog, you can get it via the my Twitter account, One to Read, there's 10 top texts there that I've used in class. The Invented by Animals one there is absolutely brilliant. So if you want to have some good ones that work particularly well for reading aloud, that's them. And last slide. And what I noticed is that we want children to question their books. We want them to become readers. So we want them to question. So if they're posing their questions readily when reading non-fiction, like, how does that happen? How does that work? I've got a gecko. Have you got this? Whatever. If they're doing that more, can we harness that and use that as part of their reading for pleasure and their reading for meaning as well? So there we go. That's what I've done so far, and there's going to be a little bit more sort of work that I'm going to be doing over the next few months.
Thank you so much. It's just so interesting to help that great profile for non-fiction, and to listen to the kinds of ways in which you're closely attending to the language they're using, the questions they ask, and the learning that's coming from it. And given you've been an absolute die-hard story time person, I think this is quite a big shift in some ways. Okay, we're handing over now to Kathy Whiting, who is one of the colleagues who won a highly commended in the Far Shore OU RfP UKLA Reading for Pleasure Awards this year. She was working with the team, so over to Kathy.
Hi everyone, and thanks for having me tonight. So I'm going to talk to you tonight about our Reading Role Models project, which started as part of a whole school initiative to firmly place reading at the heart of our school culture. Now, we thought this could be an important piece of work, but in fact we completely underestimated the powerful impact that it had on both our readers, our Year 4 pupils, and the listeners, our nursery pupils. So the project was very much practice-led rather than research-led, and is one that, with a bit of planning and no COVID, is possible for any school to easily undertake. So to give a little bit of context, there are over 500 pupils in our primary school, and the majority of those pupils have little or no access to books outside of their school life. In nursery, the majority of pupils own only one book, and that's the one they received from the Book Trust. So we knew from the wider research that what we needed to do was bring a culture in which children's love of reading was both ignited and fed. And our greatest resource was the children themselves. So what we did was we developed a means through vertical learning and sharing where the children became the inspirers and the leaders, and they did actually become the key to their own success. We started off with a whole school survey of reading habits and exposure to books, and shockingly we discovered that 66% of our nursery children were not read to at home. This percentage increased as the children got older. So we paired our Year 4 class, our reading role models, with a nursery class as a means of the children developing a commitment to reading and to listening. So the readers had to read to an unfamiliar audience with a purpose. Now, all our readers were volunteers, and any ability of reader could volunteer. An interest in participation grew with the feedback from the readers and the letters that they received from the nursery teacher. And these letters evaluated their performance and gave positive feedback by quoting directly our young but very discerning readers. And this then became a mechanism for involving parents and carers as the children shared their feedback with them. So as part of our qualitative research, the letters also provided us with a rich source of evidence, as the direct quotes were used as part of our write-up on impact, and the Year 4's responses to those were documented too. And I think probably the most interesting bit of the research for me was the incredibly important impact that we hadn't accounted for, was the emergence and development of book blether within the nursery children. So following a reading by the Year 4s, the nursery children were being a facilitated group in which they talked about not only how the book had been read, but also how they'd experienced the story. And the nursery children began to make connections between the texts, between noting themes, authors, and even the structure of the text, whether it rhymed or not. They were using full sentences and they were discussing their preferences. And the books that they did listen to the big children read during the week became the most sought after to take home. Importantly and surprisingly, teddies became a part of the process, being brought along to listen to the stories by the nursery children, and afterwards having the stories told to them by the nursery children, who were now emulating their role models. So we gave the Year 4s quite a high degree of autonomy in the choice of books that they chose. They talked through that choice with ourselves and their peers, and also practiced reading them. And what happened was, obviously, their metacognitive abilities developed and increased. Peer respect increased tremendously amongst all ability of readers. And ultimately, the project did create a culture where books were valued and where reading and listening to stories was both loved and embedded in the school culture. So that's me. Thank you very much.
That was absolutely fabulous. Thank you so much. I'm sorry I suddenly made a noise. I was opening a drawer to get out a notepad to write down your phrase. It was ignited and fed. And I thought that's just so, what rich description of how these young people develop their knowledge party where the books are the presence. Thank you. So well deserved, highly commended, and congratulations to you. So now we're turning to two teacher reading group leaders, OUKLA teacher reading group leaders, Joe Clark and Tobias Hayden, who are respectively from the Isle of Wight and from Dagenham. So over to you, Joe.
Thank you. Greetings from the beautiful Isle of Wight, which doesn't quite look like that today, unfortunately, but that's pretty much where I live. And I'm really proud to be the leader of the first ever group here on the island. There are 16 of us in our little group. Currently, we're meeting online because on an island with very small and winding country lanes, that's probably the best and most time effective way for us to get together. We are in our very early stages of meeting up. We've had our launch and we've done session 1. We've got session 2 coming up later this week, but that doesn't mean that we haven't been busy. We really have. We're using the structure and the guidance from the information that's provided, which has been absolutely fabulous. We started off by undertaking an A to Z of authors, and we did that ourselves as teachers. And we found that it was quite enlightening, actually. We did find it quite difficult. So that gave us time to reflect about our own practice and our own knowledge of acclaimed authors. But many of us then rolled that out to the children. And again, a similar sort of experience where the children found that they didn't really know that many authors. It was a fun thing to do. It was very low threat and something that the children then saw as a bit of a challenge that they wanted to get better at next time. So it's already, to coin a phrase, ignited a little bit of a spark with many of our children who want to do better at their own knowledge of what's about in children's literature. We've also had a go at completing the children's reading survey, and we did that to glean information about children's attitudes to reading. One of our most common discoveries amongst our group was that children do enjoy reading. They like it when the teacher reads to them, but sadly they're not choosing to read when they get home. And we also discovered that they are rarely read to or with. So using that information, that has for many of us started off an area of development, and group members now want to increase parental engagement with reading. We've discussed as a group how to develop a culture of reading for pleasure within our settings, and this has been something that a lot of our group members have been quite proactive about. So one of the things that we've done, as you can see here, is the the completed children's reader profiles has really enabled reading to be given a bit of a spotlight within the community. Teachers who have used the reader profile concept have reported that the children do make really positive connections with reading. They've got lots of fond memories of favourite books. They've got strong preferences about where and what and how they like to read. And the profiles and surveys have informed the group members of particular children who could be targeted as children to focus upon and to put in the spotlight. And I've included a photograph of one group member, which I think is that's it on the next slide, who is already taking time to give some attention to one child who, because of her own family situation, doesn't really get much attention for reading, but wants to read. And some of the pictures that you can see there are the results of some of the children's reading surveys that they've done to reflect themselves as readers and to really consider what their reading attitudes and behaviours are. There are also some very sort of subtle ways that our members are giving Reading for Pleasure a greater profile within their own settings and trying to make books really irresistible to children. So star books, class votes, author spotlights are all sort of being developed and started by members of the group. And very finally, you'll see on that slide there something that I wanted to share with you. And this has come from a little boy called Reese, who's in year 4. He has adult support in the classroom and the class were conducting their reader surveys. And when he was asked if he liked reading, Reese asked his learning support assistant to write down for him his answer, which was, "I wanted to say that I love reading, but then I remembered I can't read." And that for me was one of those moments which makes our job really, really special, because Reese does like to read, and it's not for us about making him a reader in terms of the decoding. We just know that Reese is really going to love reading within our school. That's all from me on the Isle of Wight.
Isle of Wight. Thank you from the Isle of Wight, and now over to Tobias from Dagenham.
Thanks, Teresa. Hi, everyone. I am a teacher in Dagenham, it's true. I live in the Royal Docks though, the windiest part of London, so it's blowing a gale here tonight. So I hope you can hear me okay. I have not had my second meeting yet, which is due to happen tomorrow, so I can't show you lots of nice glossy photos or anything, but I can tell you how I'm supporting my group members. So what we did in our first meeting was we used the Reading for Pleasure website a lot. We used the main audit to look at our overall practice. And then we committed to dig a little deeper by focusing on one particular area and do a further audit using, again, the Reading for Pleasure resources. And we also agreed to look at least 2 published examples, some of which I shared with the group members, just so they could see exactly what they're aiming for by the end of the 5 sessions in the summer. And then everyone agreed to also formulate an initial idea based on the audits they had done, complete with a rationale and some aims to bring to tomorrow's meeting. So I'm looking forward to seeing what people have come up with. Next slide, please. Now, as the leader of the group, I think it's quite important that I also carry out my own example of practice alongside my members in order to, one, show how it might be done and set an example, and also talk them through the process as well if they haven't done a piece of class-based action research before. So I'll also be sharing my steps in the process tomorrow. So I'll share with you as well now my initial idea and then how I formulated it. So it's about connecting children's volitional reading and writing for pleasure. Like Ben Harris, I'm a big advocate for writing for pleasure. And in my existing class library, I have lots of examples from previous years' children of their own published pieces of writing, which the children love reading. I noticed that they read them all the time in Reading for Pleasure time. So the rationale is that children clearly enjoy it. It also provides an authentic publishing goal and an audience for their own writing. and it raises the status of both of their reading and writing identities, particularly if we're talking about reflecting reading realities a lot recently over the last few years with the CLP's work. We also need to consider children's writing realities as well, and that kind of reciprocal relationship between the two. How often do children have the opportunity to put their own identity into their writing? So the aims are basically to strengthen those identities, to increase their desire to read the writing of their peers, both at home and at school. They're allowed to take the pieces home if they want to. And also to build that kind of reciprocal community of readers and writers, and generate an increased awareness of each other's reading and writing habits and processes. Yeah. Now, it's important to share that with my members because you need to keep them quite tight and focused. So my aims there are quite limited to 3, and my rationale is quite clear why I'm doing it. And it's, again, quite focused, focused in on one particular principle from the Reading for Pleasure pedagogy. Now, the other thing I want to talk to them about is how am I actually evaluating it, because it's important to consider that at the beginning. How are you collecting data or information? So this is a rolling project throughout the year, so I'm going to be gathering this information as we go. I'll have an online journal where I type up anything I notice, behavioural changes, things that children say to me. Otherwise, I just forget about it or it disappears unless I jot it down. And that's something I can put into my example of practice later when I'm looking at impact. I'm also using some sort of quantitative measure as well, measuring how often children choose to read a piece of each other's writing during their reading time by doing a survey of the children. I'm keeping a record of how often children choose to promote their own or each other's writing on the recommending shelf. The previous slide had an image of the shelf there, and you could see that there were some examples of children's writing there. That's when the children do a kind of top 5 of their favourite books or bits of writing in the class, and they take it in turns to do that, a bit like John Biddle's example of practice. And I'm also tallying how often the children choose to take the other children's writing home. So I'm trying to cover all the fronts there and collect some rich data that I can put into my example of practice. So that's what I'll be sharing with my group tomorrow.
Great, Tobias, thank you. Can I interrupt you because of time? But thank you so much.
Oh, yeah.
It's really lovely to hear you
no
talk
problem.
about tracking the consequences, because it's easier to develop rich practice and harder to track the difference it makes on our young readers. And I think that's such an important piece that we all pay more attention to. We don't want to measure their pleasure, but we do want to understand what is making a difference or not, and then adjust. So seeing how often they read at home and so on will make a big difference to that. Great, I'm going to move us on because of time, and we're turning to Angela Jenkins, who's going to give us some poetry recommendations. Over to you, Angela.
Thanks, Teresa. Hi, everybody. Gosh, it was so difficult to come up with just 3 recommendations. So to help guide my choices, I tried to think about 3 things. What motivates us to read poetry for pleasure? Drawing on the key findings, of course, from the Teachers Readers research, and making some selections that are applicable across the age range. So first of all, I think one of the reasons that we choose to read poetry for pleasure is the joy of it. Being able to laugh, to read aloud with friends, to have those texts in common. And that can be content that's funny, or it can just be about enjoying the rhythm and the rhyme and the sounds on our tongue. So for a communal social reading text, I have gone with Zim Zam Zoom. Poems to Read Aloud by James Carter and illustrated by Nicola Colton. I think this is most suitable for children aged 4 to 8. There's 16 zappy poems in here, perfect for reading out loud, be that at school or playtime or even bedtime. There's funny poems, exciting poems, action-packed poems, and some that are even a tiny bit scary. But all of them celebrate the art of rhyme and are great fun to read aloud. Another reason we might choose to read poetry for pleasure is to celebrate, to commemorate, to reflect poems regularly feature in big life events, don't they? Weddings, funerals, birthdays, anniversaries, and even presidential inaugurations. So having a poem read aloud is a real pleasurable experience. And as a teacher, we need to have at least one really good anthology on our desk, ready to pick up and read aloud from. It's an essential part of our toolkit, I think, when it comes to reading for pleasure. So I'm going to recommend Everyone Sang, A Poem for Every Feeling. This is edited by William Seacart and illustrated by Emily Sutton. This is a magnificent anthology of over 100 poems themed around different moods, a combination of traditional favourites and recent gems. It's divided into 4 sections, including poems to make you smile, poems to move you, poems to give you hope, poems to calm and connect you. There's an extraordinary and diverse range of poets featured here, including Maya Angelou, Roger McGough, Jackie Kay, Caroline Duffy, Joseph Crello, and W.B. Yeats. A great collection. Finally, I wanted to recommend a collection or a text that is about reading poetry personally, quietly, a poem that can lift our mood, or just to act as a companion, knowing we're not alone. And verse novels are a great way to do that. So I'm going to recommend, my final recommendation is Run Rebel by Manjeet Mann. This is most appropriate for readers aged over 13, I think, because it deals with some quite difficult subject matter in terms of domestic violence. And it's a really compelling, powerful verse novel telling the story of 15-year-old Amber Ray and how she manages to finally summon the courage to escape from her abusive father's rule and take her downtrodden mother and sister with her. Those are my 3 recommendations.
Brilliant. Thank you, Angela. That's really fab. We're on perfect timing. So I'm going to now hand over to Debbie Thomas and Georgie Lax, who are introducing our fabulous and very welcome author in the spotlight tonight, Petr Horácek. So welcome to Petra, and over to Debbie and Georgie.
Hello. Well, I have to say, you know, Petra's made it very easy for Georgie and I this evening. Georgie and I had lots of fun preparing and reading lots of books and finding out lots of information. But actually, Petra's going to introduce himself and read some of his story to us to get started. So we'll hand straight over. I'm going to stop screen sharing, and that will allow Petra to start screen sharing some of your slides.
Hello. Hi, everybody. My name is Petr Horácek, and I was asked to introduce myself as briefly as possible. So I thought the best way probably would be if I read you one of my stories. But before I do that, these are some of the picture books I illustrated. I should explain about my accent. I was born in Czech Republic, in the capital city Prague. I believe some of you probably been there and visited Prague. It's an old city full of stories. I've been in Czech Republic just recently, after 2 years. This is the place which I really love. It's a cottage which belongs to my friend. It's his summer cottage, and it's the place where I write my books. I try to go there at least once a year. It's by the woods and in the middle of nowhere. I paint, and in the evening I write stories. And this is one of the books I wrote in this place. It's called The Best Place in the World. He and his friends, the rabbits, were sitting at the top of the hill. They were looking down at their meadow. The meadow was beautiful. "Do you think this is the best place in the whole world?" he asked his friends. "Of course it is," said the rabbits. "It's the place where we run and play chase together." "But surely we can run anywhere," said he. The rabbits didn't hear him. They had already started running. "What do you think?" he asked his other friends. "Is our meadow the best place in the world?" Definitely, said Bear. But why? Asked Hare. Because of the bees, said Bear. And where there are bees, there is honey. I love honey. And most of all, I love sharing it with you. But bees and honey are everywhere, said Hare. Hare saw the little birds. What do you think? He said. Is our meadow the best place in the whole world? Yes, said the little birds. But why? Asked Hare. It's surrounded by trees, said the little birds. We love singing to you from higher. But there are high trees everywhere, said Hare, and he went to ask Duck. This is definitely the best place in the world, said Duck. But why? Asked Hare. I like swimming in the stream, said Duck. But there are streams everywhere, said Hare. Still looking for the answer, Hare visited Owl. Do you think our meadow is the best place in the world? He asked Hare. Owl didn't answer.
If you got changed.
Instead, she said, you have asked us all this question.
My microphone isn't on.
Why don't you explore the world and find out for yourself? The next morning, Hare left home and set off to look for the best place in the world. He soon found himself walking through the most wonderful fields and orchards. The rabbits would like running here. Maybe this is the best place in the world, said Hare. He saw gushing rivers and waterfalls. Duck would love swimming here. This could be the best place in the world, said Hare. Hare climbed the mountains. It's so peaceful here, and it is so high. I know the birds would love it, said Hare. Perhaps this is the best place in the world. Eventually, Hare reached the sea. The sun is like a pot of honey, he thought. I know the bear would love it here. This must be the best place in the world. After traveling all over the world, Hare came to the desert. He lay down and looked at the stars above. He thought about Owl and all the beautiful places he had seen. He felt lonely. Suddenly, he knew the answer to his question. He jumped up and ran through the desert, over the hills, up the mountains, across the fields, through the woods, all the way home, because the best place in the world is where your friends are. Okay, so.
Thank you, Petr. That was lovely. Thank you so much for sharing your beautiful book. The children at Starcross Primary School have loved reading and listening to your stories. All age ranges have found these so accessible and relatable. Your books have prompted discussions, allowing our youngest and oldest children at school to make connections to their existing knowledge. They had so many questions for you. Lots of these focused on illustrations and your imagination. The children were also really interested in your artistic process. They wondered if you used paint or chalk, watercolours or pencil when illustrating. Please could you share with us a little more about the process of creating your books?
Well, actually, I get very often inspired by material. So when I do lots of school visits, actually organized by Authors Aloud, and so I go to schools, and this is one of the pictures I would take with me. It's a picture from the book which doesn't exist. It's kind of a picture which, and this one as well, there are pictures without a story. So we sometimes create a story with children, and we talk about, what actually happening in the pictures. And children are often asking how the book's happening. So I often start with a picture. I think in picture. So I would do maybe painting like this, and then I would think what happened next. And the story will kind of pop into my head, but I will start sketching it first. I will do these little thumbnails, these very little drawings, which I do just for myself. I write it in very bad English, and then I make these storyboards. These are mainly for my editors. We changed them many, many times. This is from the book Puffin Peter, which had perhaps 10 versions. And when my editor and publisher are completely happy with the sketches, that only then they allow me to change these thumbnails into final artwork. So this is actually the picture. So as you can see, or this one, just a note on the sketchbook, which I would do perhaps on the train. And this is the final work. Sometimes I do pictures for the book which actually don't make it to the book, so they end up in the cupboard because we have too many pictures, or because we change the story a little bit. So yes, so these are the pictures from the book Puffin Peter. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Petra. Fantastic. Just seeing the pictures, they're so beautiful, aren't they? The illustrations, and hearing about the physical process of how you create the books. Tell us a little bit more, because the children were really interested in where you get your imaginative ideas from. And I'm guessing lots of people listening will want to know, what inspires you to write the stories?
Yes, well, again, I think ideas are everywhere. And because I studied art, the pictures always come first to me. So I would do a picture like this, perhaps just for myself, because I feel like that it may be a dream, it could be just an idea. I get inspired by paintings in the galleries, maybe photo in the magazine, but very often it's the material itself, perhaps a bit of paper in my studio, and it will trigger out some ideas. I always keep in my studio, I always keep a little sketchbook. There are very little sketchbook, which if I have an idea, I will do a sketch of anything like this. Here is a very posh lady who feeds this little child and keep distance so she doesn't get dirty. And this is something like Red Riding Hood or whatever, Inside the Wolf. And here I did a picture of mouse eating banana, not knowing if mice actually would eat bananas. So I Google it, find horrific videos of mice eating bananas in the dark in the kitchen. So I thought perhaps I could do a book about it. So actually I ended up to write a book, The Mouse Who Ate the Moon. As I said, I go to schools, I get lots of artwork from children. I love it. And I get really inspired by what children are doing. And when I get home, sometimes I will make a version of it. So here I get a picture of peacock from one girl, and I did a picture of girl talking to a peacock. Here I challenged a little boy, said, can you draw me some animal doing something funny? He did a picture of a bird riding a scooter. So when I get home, I did my version of the bird riding the scooter. There we go. And later on, again, this is Puffin Peter. I gave the book to my neighbor and she gave me a thank you card. And she knew the puffins got somewhere colors. She forgot it's on the beak, so she colored in his bottom. And I really found it, again, very inspiring. So I painted this card on the big canvas. I took it, this is quite a big painting. And I did my version of her thank you card. So what I'm saying is I'm learning from children a lot. I like the way how they think and the freedom in expression and everything like that. So yeah.
Thank you, Petra. And you're learning from children, but actually we felt lots of your books, have really important life lessons as themes in them, about relationships and perseverance and friendship and resilience. There are so many things in your stories. We were wondering what you thought about the role, children's books particularly have in shaping the values of our young readers, or is that what you intend to do as an author? Do you set out to do that?
Well, one thing I really don't like, I don't like when children are patronized, and when children are as intelligent as we are. The difference is only they have less experience than we do. And so I think children really deserve a little bit more than just a joke in the book, or perhaps maybe just a couple of pictures without, I think children really deserve a good story. And I like sometimes working on two levels. I did I did 2 books. For example, Elephant and The Last Tiger. These are two books which I wanted to mention. The Elephant, it's about imaginary friend. But actually the little child will probably think that the elephant is real, and it wouldn't spoil the story. It's about the boy who brings the elephant at home. Adults will understand its imaginary friend. But I like the idea that it works on the both levels. And one day child will read into it a little bit more, who knows. The Last Tiger is one of my kind of more serious books. It's about, well, it's called The Last Tiger. And it's about a tiger being captured, and in the cage, he's actually going smaller and smaller. And one day he walks to his freedom. And again, adults will know what I'm talking about. Children will think it's about a tiger who actually escaped and nobody ever saw him again. And so these are 2 levels. And I like that. And as I said, I believe that children deserve a good story. They not, you know, they are very intelligent and they will work it out, rather complicated stories as well. So yeah, I always try to have some message in the book. Yes.
Thank you, Petra. It's so lovely hearing about all the animals, and that's something that we really love discovering at school. All the children have been so inspired seeing all of the different characters in your books. We'll definitely be using your lovely draw along videos that are available, where we can see you draw some of your characters, and we will be using those at school. The children were wondering which animal character you would be and why.
Well, I feel like a bear. I should be bear, I think. I think bear is the one.
Why is that? Tell us why.
Well, I would like to, I could say that bears are faster than they look, and they are cleverer than they look. But because I just said I feel like a bear, it's not, yeah, no, I don't know. I like bears. They are lovely.
I think they're meaner than they look, maybe.
Maybe.
I hope that's not true of you. What's your next book going to be about, Petra?
Well, again, I mentioned bear, and this is how I feel, kind of silly bear. And my next book will be about bear. In fact, it will be about 2 bears. Both of them are lonely, and they kind of meet by chance in woods, and they decided to help each other to find a friend. And of course, you know, as in the process, they become good friends. So that's my next book about bears.
Well, it's nearly Christmas, and at school we've all absolutely loved Susie Goose and the Christmas Star. We were wondering if you can finish, please, by recommending your favourite Christmas book for children.
Okay, my favorite Christmas book, it's Dream Snow by Eric Carle. I love Eric Carle. I love everything he does. This is a beautiful, very, very atmospheric book. When I read it, I feel that's a book you have to read by the open fire, and it's so cozy. And I'm very lucky. This book was given to me by Joyce Dunbar, but I already had a luxurious version of it. And it's got a foils like this, which covers with the snow all the animals, including Eric Carle. And I'm not a big fan of books which make noise, but Eric Carle did 2 of them, and both of them are beautiful. And this one finish with this sound. I will let you listen to Christmassy. I think it's lovely. So this is my recommendation, The Dream Snow.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Petra. Thank you for joining us this evening and for the time you've taken to prepare. I think everybody's inspired actually seeing the artwork, but also I can see lots in the chat where people are talking about the books they're now going to be getting. So I think we've probably increased everyone's book buying through that session. But thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you very much for having me. My pleasure.
Thank you. That's
Thank you.
absolutely fabulous. Great to be with us. Thank you so much, Petra. Now's the moment just before 9 o'clock when we get to do our book wave. So please seize a book. I can't seem to get rid of the chat line, so I can't see everybody. But if you can wave a book in front, Rich, I think, is going to do a photograph. Put yours right in front of your nose or near your face so somebody can see it. And then Helen, I'm going to ask you to call out somebody and go, woo, what has she got, or something. So mic on, Helen, please. And Sarah Hepworth, you're next, and Rich after that. So go for it.
Oh, well, I can see, Georgie's got what we've just been reading, hasn't she, I think? I'm trying to spot people on my line of people. Let me see, who else is there? Joe Clark, what have you got there? Fledgling, I don't know that one.
Oh, it's fabulous. Kind of Skellig, it was inspired by Skellig. So an angel that arrives kind of takes on an owl form, but it
Wow.
brings with it all sorts of unraveling mysteries. It's quite dark, set in a forest, really, really quite gripping. Upper Key Stage 2 possibly, but yeah, I read it in a day and a bit because I just couldn't put it down. Fabulous read.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so this is the Key Stage 1 graphic novel that I would have recommended. And I was looking at Richard's, actually, trying to see that beautiful illustration, Richard.
Rich, tell us about it.
It's one from the States. It's a bit trickier to get hold of at the moment, but that's Tide Song by Wendy Zhu. It's our next
Typical, Richard. You pass us one that nobody can blasty well get.
I like a bit of, yeah, hard to get ones are good for me. I've just seen someone holding up, it was a lovely edition of, I think it was Front Desk and Inside the Villains. Inside the Villains, it's Zoe B, and really interesting sort of look at fairy tales, and I think there's loads of little hidden things there. And Front Desk I absolutely love. I'm waiting for the next Kelly Yang book to come out. So
yeah, brilliant. Kat Ribbons, can I jump to you? Mic on, please, and tell us about it.
Yeah, I've got The Explorers at Pirate Island, which is actually the 5th book in the Polar Bears Explorers Club, but it's looking at the Ocean Explorers Club. So yes, it's a really good series, and it's the 5th one.
Brilliant, thank you. Kathleen Falloon, I've gone to another screen. Can you tell us about what you're waving? I think you're waving something. Yes, good.
Hi, yeah, I've got the Book of Stolen Dreams by David Farr. And it's a lovely book about a family who they go to a library that's all kind of forbidden, and there's a book that's stolen from it. I'm only part way through it, but really, really enjoying it. So that's what I would recommend.
Brilliant. We've got not enough time, otherwise we'll be here past the hour, and we promised ourselves we wouldn't. So thank you very much for sharing those. Great book wave. Let's hope Rich Charlesworth got some photographs. That was his job, but let's hope so. Thank you all for joining us tonight. It's been fabulous to have so many. Thank you for lovely comments in the chat line. And we had at our full pitch, we had 170 teachers and higher education lecturers and students giving up their time 2 weeks before Christmas, when there's so much else to do, to hear Petra and to hear others share recommendations and what they're doing under the RfP agenda. And that has great respect. So thank you. I was just going to mention one piece of research. Well, I'm going to mention two. One is Laura Scholes. She's an Australian writer who's bucking the trend to say boys do. Not all boys don't like reading, loads of boys do, and her research has been looking at how those boys do. So if you want to look back at the RfP site under the research section, you can find free golden open access books there. And equally, Lucy Strange, who's a teacher and a publisher, publisher and author, brilliant author, whose new book is coming out, this one actually, in the spring, The Mermaid in the Mill Pond, has just done a super, not a research piece, but a super secondary reflection on the challenges of developing Key Stage 2, 3 and 4 young readers who are really keen adolescent readers. So that's now live on the site, do go look. And have a very happy Christmas, everyone. Thank you to Deb and Stephanie who got all this together, and for all the 11 people who have shared brilliant practice and ideas tonight. Thank you very much. Cheers, everybody. Happy Christmas. This is water, by the way. Nothing sad. No.